Outside of the Super Bowl, right? One of the biggest topics in this past few weeks have been the head coach hirings,
Yep.
right? So and there's been 10 of them. I'm sorry, there's been 10 head coaching hirings. That's almost a third of the league. Head coaches got fired, so that means we had 10 coaches come in. I want to do this. I want to rank the top 3 head coach hirings in this cycle. Paige Dimakos, I'm gonna pass it to you first.
Okay, so in order, number one, and this is not, I want to be very clear. We're going to do a thing where we break down the whole staffs. We're just looking at the head coach hire. That's it. Nothing else. Nothing past that. So, number one, John Harbaugh. I don't think that's controversial to say that that was the best hire of the group. Number two, Mike McCarthy. And number three, Robert Saleh. For the same reasons I chose those two, experience, been there, done that, know they know how to coach. And Robert Saleh was done dirty in New York. The Jets are a toxic franchise. Nobody should take anything they do into account for any future jobs, because all you needed to do was Robert Saleh went back to the San Francisco 49ers, had practice squad linebackers, and brought that team to the postseason. I think Robert Saleh deserves that, and I think he's the right guy from a toughness standpoint to be a coach with Cam Ward. So I'm going, those are my three: Harbaugh, McCarthy, Saleh, 1, 2, 3 in that order.
Was there any situation where you started to not put, I guess, almost, I don't call them retread head coaches, right? But coaches that have previously had head coaching experience. Like, how much did that matter to you?
It matters in that when I'm factoring one versus the other, one has the proof is in the pudding and one doesn't. So the other one is always going to be more of a risk, because if I haven't seen you do it, why should I assume that it's going to go well? I have to factor in both sides. It could go well, but it could also be a disaster. The other coaches I know, I've seen, I know they know the details. Some of the things that head coaches that doesn't get talked about is just the details around scheduling, meetings, putting a calendar together, having guys that you have relationships with to build out a staff. A lot of this had to do with when we look at these staffs as a whole, these guys are going to have good staffs because they've been in the league. They have long relationship trees and trees that I really value. So the only coach that I almost put in there was I really liked the hiring for Miami with Jeff Hafley going in a totally different direction, in a direction, quite frankly, that I think they need to. But to me, this was a pretty obvious 1, 2, 3 as far as coaches go and the situations.
Yep. So let's do this. I agree with you. Actually, I have the
Same list,
exact.
same
I
exact
have the
list.
same exact list, right? And that's why I asked you what was your thought
Wow.
process in the same exact order, right? Great minds think alike. So what I'm gonna do is this: I'm gonna go with a couple other guys, right? Just so we can twist this up and have a
Okay.
conversation. And I'll tell you a couple other guys I like. First, Todd Monken to the Cleveland Browns,
Yep.
which I did not like this hire until Emmanuel Acho decided to criticize the hire, and in criticizing the hire, talked about everything great that Todd Monken did. And I said, you know what? This is a pretty good goddamn hire, right? All he did was develop MVP Lamar Jackson. All he did was win a national championship with the Georgia Bulldogs. All he did was develop other quarterbacks. And I'm like, that's a pretty extensive list. The Cleveland Browns, you actually did a good job, right?
I can attest to this because we were all in Mobile together watching this clip of Emmanuel Acho make an absolute ass of himself, while I actually going through what would be considered a top tier resume for any NFL head coaching job. He quite literally
first time head coach.
Head coach. We all sat there and went, damn, I kind of mocked that Monken hire this morning, but I'm kind of all aboard now. Like, thanks, Acho, for actually laying out all the reasons why we should believe in it. That wasn't your intention, but kudos to you, buddy. We all are in because Emmanuel Acho's out, which means on principle from here on out, I'm in on anything he's out on. That's what I've come to terms with.
And the second one, the Valley, get excited.
Oh,
I
boy.
actually like the Mike LaFleur hire.
Okay.
Coming from obviously the Sean McVay situation, and obviously the tie-ins that he has family wise into the NFL. I think this is a pretty good hire because you finally have somebody to take a quarterback and develop him, no matter what quarterback it has been, right? And the Cardinals have lacked the offensive identity, Paige Dimakos, since you were there, right?
Yep.
With Carson Palmer, Bruce Arians,
Since
and
Bruce
those guys,
left.
and he had a real offensive identity, and that's what they've been needing. Jonathan Gannon, he fell so short of that, right? A complete failure as a head coach, and I don't mind being critical because of the things that he did as a head coach. If he was a
Yeah.
player and he did those things, we wouldn't mind blowing up his spot. So I'm gonna be the same amount of critical of the things that he did off the field and on the sideline, right, as a head coach. So I like the Mike LaFleur situation because whether it's Kyler Murray or if they draft another quarterback, they finally get a transitional piece and a guy that knows what good quarterback play looks like and be able to kind of build around that. So I actually like that hire.
I was going to ask you, do you like the hire with Kyler or without Kyler more?
So the way I look at it is I'm looking at Mike LaFleur as an independent piece in this situation that I like him as a hire, and I like that offensive system being able to find a quarterback. I think
Yeah.
that's what it's for me, right? This is, in my opinion, is dependent of I'm independent, I'm sorry, of Kyler Murray, right?
Yeah.
It's basically about the head coach and the offensive scheme, and then we'll figure out everything else after that. And then also him being with the Rams, he has familiarity with the
Yep.
entire division already because he's went through it a couple times already. So just some familiarity, giving him the opportunity to work with Kyler. But listen, go draft a quarterback. If there's a free agent that you really like, go after that guy also.
And I think Cardinal fans, I hope you guys listen to what Keith just said, because I think you need to look at this with a clean slate. You need to let this new coaching staff evaluate whether or not they think that Kyler Murray is the right guy to move forward with, because the situation, if it was in any other city other than maybe Miami and a couple others, this would have been shined a bright light on how bad things have been over the last year and a half and how much of a mismanagement this was, not only from ownership, but from general manager and head coach down with the Kyler situation. So I trust that LaFleur, based off of his background, based off of the fact that he's been in the division, based off of the fact that he comes from the McVay coaching tree and his brother's own coaching tree, he can make this decision. And if he decides to run it back with Kyler, you kind of got to be behind that because he's got the cachet with quarterbacks to justify it. So I hope Cardinal fans listen to this.
Yeah, and it could be a 1-year thing, right? And this would be Kyler's third, fourth OC, third head coach. Like if he doesn't get it done, I think you clearly move on after the season, and then you give him a young quarterback. And then also, listen, this lines up perfectly with the 2027 NFL draft, right? You talk about the Arch Mannings, the Lenoris Sellers of the world, the Nico Imiavas, and so many other quarterbacks that sit in that draft. That you get him a young guy, and you still get him 2 more years to work with that guy if you're talking about giving every head coach 3 years like I like to do.
And Monty, the general manager, eyes are on you, big dog. This roster's got to get better. Period. End of story. You look at this division and it is very clear. I don't care what position you want to go to. Running back, tight end, wide receivers, linebacker. Look at that.
You got the worst.
You got the worst by far amongst all 4 teams. So you need to look yourself in the mirror and go, it's time for me to earn my money. Because at the end of the day, the head coach can only do so much. When he's got toys that aren't as big or aren't as strong as the other toys, you're going to lose every single time. And the gap between where the Cardinals are and where the Rams and the Seahawks and the Niners are is huge. So it's time for this team to actually start to figure itself out and make decisions on guys like, are you going to use Marvin Harrison Jr.? If not, trade him and get some you guys gotta make some calls here because they've been living in the middle and playing the middle for quite some time. And it's time to push your chips to the middle and actually go in a direction. And I think that's what LaFleur brings.
Yep, I agree with that. Well, Paige Dimakos is one of the hires that's not a head coach hire, right? That has been talked about a lot. And that's the New York Giants deciding to hire Matt Nagy, right? And you have a lot of familiar with Matt Nagy, being the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Do you trust or should Giants fans trust Matt Nagy to develop Jackson Dart?
So let's put the bias aside for a second, and I will ask a very simple question. Keith, what about Matt Nagy's time frame in coaching quarterbacks, specifically young quarterbacks, gives you the confidence that he can handle the situation?
Not a damn thing at all. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. It's the exact opposite of trust. Matt Nagy has built a resume where you don't trust him with young quarterbacks. He's proven that you can't trust him with young quarterbacks. When you talk about Mitchell Trubisky, you talk about Justin Fields, and there's more quarterbacks on that resume that those quarterbacks did not progress at all. They all hit a ceiling. And to be completely honest with you, from a potential standpoint, right, and what we know about the NFL now as far as quarterbacks and their development, right, the Sam Darnold reclamation project, the Geno Smith reclamation projects, right, and the Baker Mayfield reclamation projects, to where these guys have physical tools, and more times than not, the coaches ruined them,
Yep.
right? The coaches don't develop them the right way. So I can't help but go back to Mitchell Trubisky and the Justin Fields, guys that had physical tools, and Matt Nagy was not able to get the best out of them. So I agree with I'm on board 100% that when this head coach hiring, when this offensive coordinator hiring came through, I said this can't be real,
I
right?
agree.
And we know the offensive coordinator that's tied to the Harbaughs, Greg Roman, right? I would have been perfectly fine with seeing
100%.
that again. And I'm glad you prefaced the last segment when it came to head coach hirings, because I'll say this is how important this offensive coordinator hiring is to me. That when this offensive coordinator hiring of Matt Nagy came through, if that had to factor into how do we rank the head coaches, John Harbaugh would have not ranked in my top 3.
I agree.
That's how important this would have
I
ranked,
agree.
because I am fearful of the situation. I'm fearful because of what Matt Nagy has done with Moore, meaning that Jackson Dart is not a complete product. Jackson Dart is not a can't-miss quarterback prospect.
No.
So if you don't get this right, you can very well get this really wrong with Jackson Dart. So that's why I have, to be honest with you, I have zero trust.
I asked it to you on purpose because I wanted it to not come directly from a Bears fan, right? Because the reality is, what I can tell you is I watched him single-handedly have one good year with Mitch and then never make a single step of progress after that.
Mm-hmm.
Then move on and have Justin Fields and not put the right guys around Justin and have the right infrastructure. And I know the Giants fans and the organization are going to push back and say, what about Pat Mahomes? I give Matt Nagy 0% credit for Patrick Mahomes, because why? Eric Bieniemy was there before he was, okay? The Andy Reid is the offensive play caller. I'm going to say this again. Andy Reid is the offensive play caller, not Matt Nagy, not Eric Bieniemy, Andy Reid. Andy Reid is, if not the best, a top 3 offensive mind in the history of the NFL. Patrick Mahomes sat for a year behind Alex Smith, was drafted to a very good football team that went to the AFC Championship without him. It's not a replicatable situation, and what the New York Giants are doing right now is not a close comparable to what you're seeing with the Kansas City Chiefs. So yes, he's been around Patrick Mahomes. Sure, he's called plays for Patrick Mahomes or been involved in quarterback meetings with Mahomes, but I'm not giving him any credit for the development of Patrick Mahomes. That I give the credit to Andy Reid, number 1, 2, the skill set of Patrick Mahomes as a whole, and 3, Eric Bieniemy, before I even mention Matt Nagy. So I think that's where, if you're Giants fans, the one thing you're holding on to here is John Harbaugh deserves the trust because of what he did with Lamar Jackson, because of his ability to understand he won a Super Bowl winning a certain way. And then he changed everything about what he did as a head coach offensively to get the best out of Lamar Jackson. And because of that, I will hold off on absolutely obliterating this hire because John Harbaugh's there. But as far as Matt Nagy goes and his trust, I ain't got no trust for Matt Nagy.
Yep, I'm right there with that. You know what? There's a certain topic that I want to come back to in our last segment in regards to the Matt Nagy situation. Let's do this though. We have 2 teams, right? We have the Baltimore Ravens, we have the Buffalo Bills, who entered the season with lofty expectations. They both fell short. They both fired their head coaches. They both have young coordinators that elevated into head coaches, talking about Jesse Minter now with the Baltimore Ravens. And then we have Joe Brady with Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. I want to ask this. Which head coach quarterback combination are you more confident in? Jesse Minter and Lamar Jackson, or Joe Brady and Josh Allen?
Can I vote neither? Because I don't love either option
Push
here, to be honest with you. I
the
don't like,
field.
I don't like the fact that these guys moved off of, both organizations moved off of head coaches that had won for prolonged periods of time and turned to new guys without a full staff that I thought there were better options for them as far as who they could have brought in. I will slightly give Joe Brady the nod, and it's because he has a cachet built up with Josh Allen. They've been together for a couple of years now. He's called plays. In fact, last year when Josh Allen won an MVP, he was running that offense. And because of that, I can't fault him for his general manager's problems. And that is that the general manager made the roster worse year over year. That was not Sean McDermott's fault. That was not Joe Brady's fault. That was not Josh Allen's fault. That was newly appointed president of operations, Brandon Beane's fault, who somehow skipped himself into a promotion after single-handedly not being great at his job. So Joe Brady, I'm going to give him the nod specifically for the fact that they have experience between him and Josh, and we've seen it work. We've seen what him and Josh can do, and I'm going to go just give them the nod slightly. But like I said, I made the joke, but in total seriousness, I don't really love either of these hires.
Yeah, so with me, I'm gonna go with Lamar Jackson and Jesse Minter as the combination that I'm more confident in. And reason being is that the Baltimore Ravens culture, right? If we
Yeah.
believed what all the reports have said was that they just needed a new voice. Well, guess what? Jesse Minter is a new voice. She'll be able to plug and play them and rock and roll. And it's instead of it being about Jesse Minter and Lamar Jackson, it's more about the issues that you just outlined for the Buffalo Bills that I'm not sure if Joe Brady fulfills all of those different situations as a new time head coach, right? Game clock management is going to be new for him. Managing the roster is going to be new for him. Having all of these different meetings and being in front of the public, all of these things are going to be new for him to where I believe that there's just going to be a learning curve, right? Initially, to where I think with Jesse Minter, the same type of requirement or load, he's not going to have to take on the same load and just in a different caliber because of how strong the infrastructure is of the Baltimore Ravens. The Buffalo Bills, if I'm being completely honest, I have no confidence that this thing can't fall apart at the seams. If we're being real, right? We've seen the Buffalo Bills be bad. We've seen the Buffalo Bills be very bad for a very long time. We've
Yep.
seen them make very bad decisions, right? So I'm just not that confident because I think it's unfair to Joe Brady kind of being thrust in his role. And obviously it's a lifelong dream for him, right?
Yeah, of
But
course.
I think what he's stepping into already seems like a dysfunctional situation, right? At the end of the day. And I think his best traits, they were utilized when he's the offensive coordinator, but I think they need more than that with him being a head coach. And it might take away from him doing what he's best at, and that's calling plays.
I think that Joe Brady, hopefully, right, has the ability to build off of the infrastructure that Sean McDermott built because he was a
Mhm.
part of the staff with Sean. So you have to hope that if you're hiring him, that he was paying attention to, and he was a part of, quite frankly, over the last few years, the details and the schedule and all the things that Sean McDermott did
Well,
to build off of. I agree with you from like a totality of the entire time with the Ravens. The Ravens have better infrastructure. And if Terry Pagula for the Buffalo Bills, the owner, is going to butt his head in, this is going to be disaster city, quite frankly,
yeah,
if that happens.
and here what I'm trying to say is that if Joe Brady having learned from Sean McDermott, right, about how to coach and how to handle certain things and little things as far as team meetings and post game speeches, right? If he does that and it's not Joe Brady, but it's a version of Sean McDermott, then that's all it is. It's a
Yeah.
version of Sean McDermott,
Yeah.
right? And then it's not getting a new voice in a new situation. And that's why I thought if they were going to make a different hire, go in a totally different direction, because that's what y'all told us, right? That this was stale because we needed to move on from Sean McDermott's thought process. So that's the part that kind of worries me just a little bit. Not that I don't think Joe Brady has earned enough to become a head coach as far as qualifiers. It's just the Buffalo Bills, something about it right now, it doesn't sit well
It's
with me.
that press conference, man. You can't shake it.
Yeah,
And I get it. I understand when you talk about listening to Stephen Biscotti for the Ravens and then listening to Terry Bagula, it's like one's an F1 driver and one's a Tonka truck driver. Like they
yeah.
look like totally different situations. I'm like, that guy knows what he's doing. This guy might have stepped to the mic for the first time. You would have thought that he had never, ever had to talk. And he owns a whole nother franchise in the Buffalo Sabres. So I hope for Buffalo Bills fans, he's not very involved, because if he is, oh, it's not going to be pretty. Not going to be pretty.
Yep. Listen, speaking of head coach hirings, right? And we said it, we had 10 of them. We almost had a third of the league with new head coaching hirings. And guess what? We haven't had not one minority hired, right? We had 2 fired, but not one minority hired. And I guess you could put Robert Saleh in that. So I'll say one.
Yeah.
One out of the 10. Paige Dimakos, what's the issue with the NFL and their ability to hire minority head coaches?
I feel uniquely prepared to have this conversation because of my time covering the team under Bruce Arians. And Bruce Arians is one of the only coaches that I've seen and been around that has made a conscious effort to hire women and minorities throughout his process. And when he did this, you think of a guy like a Todd Bowles, who's now a head coach. When he was teaching these guys underneath him, it was always with the understanding of you have to earn your way up, because Bruce did not come from a family name. Bruce earned his way to being a head coach. Mm-hmm. And he didn't become a head coach until he was 60 years old. And it required a head coach in Chuck Pagano getting cancer and him having to take time away, and Bruce getting the interim head coaching job that year. Otherwise, he never gets a head coaching job. And so he's always been very understanding of, he knows the process, he knows the game. He's also a personality that not everybody meshes with. When I think of the Chicago Bears and the interview that happened with him, where he thought he had the job, leaving that building to coach Jay Cutler. And as a Bears fan, it's devastating to think that instead of hiring Bruce Arians, they chose Mark Trestman. And you look at their two resumes and you go, how on earth did this guy get the job over this guy? And it was all about who they liked and who they felt most comfortable with. And unfortunately, that happens a lot when it comes down to the head coaching hires and who these owners choose. So I say all that to say the problem that Bruce has always identified and talked about, it starts much further down the coaching cycle, in that the coordinator positions, the opportunity for those jobs, they have to make more of a conscious effort, because when a minority gets hired and gets a head coaching job and gets fired, and let's say they hadn't earned that spot or they hadn't worked their way up, it backfires. It ends up hurting the entire minority group, which is horrible. And it's not the same for white guys. It's just not. And unfortunately, the specifically to the offensive side of the ball, it's something that Bruce has mentioned a ton. Most coaches, a lot of coaches, especially over the last 5 to 7 years, are getting hired who have offensive backgrounds. And more often than not, if you look at a coaching staff and you look for minorities, they tend to be on the defensive side of the ball. And that needs to change. Or we need to stop making it every play caller on earth gets a job, which is what I would prefer. Because I think the most egregious non-hire this offseason was Brian Flores. He deserves a job. He's deserved a job for a long time. And I don't really know what else he can do to prove that he deserves a job, except probably continuing down his lawsuit with the NFL over racism. So if you want to understand why there's a problem in the NFL, look no further than the coaching situation that happened in Miami, where you had a coach in Brian Flores who lost his job for telling the owner that he wasn't going to tank, which is inherently backwards, because you should never ask a competitor to lose games. And the fact that they thought that they could get a coach to agree to that is asinine. And then portrayed Mike McDaniel as a minority hire, which we both know has always been a little bit bordering on ridiculous the entire time anyway. So I think this is a big conversation. There's a lot of complexities that go into this, but the foundations, I believe, as I've discussed with coaches, this has to start much earlier on. It has to start with coaches creating opportunities for minorities earlier on, in the coordinator positions, in big positions that are going to help create better head coaches, because you need the background to be able to get those head coaching jobs. And if you can't get an offensive coordinator job or a defensive coordinator job, how are you supposed to get a head coaching job? So I think that's where this problem really starts, fundamentally with the staffs that are put together, and hopefully more minority hires just being hired across the entire staffs.
Yeah, so I'm going to say this, right? That the issue in hiring of minority head coaches in the NFL is not just the NFL problem.
No.
It's a football problem.
Yeah.
It goes to college football also, right? And what I've known from my time, having spent time in college football, right? And even projecting it to the NFL and knowing the guys that I know that have got promoted, right? And guys that have stayed in certain situations, that usually getting promoted in the NFL or college football, it's a result of who you decide to have beers with in after hours at the end of the day. This is the biggest fraternity on earth, talking about the NFL, right? And those guys that you align yourself with are going to be the guys that are going to help you out. And unfortunately for black coaches, they have to do this, right? They may have to compromise some of who they are, or have conversations that they don't want to have, or befriend people that they don't want to befriend in order to move up the ladder. And essentially, that's not fair at the end of the day,
No, it's
right?
not.
The NFL, they don't have a clear resume. We see coaches from all over the place. You just brought up the Mark Trestman situation. This guy was a coach in the CFL, right? And got a head coaching opportunity. I told you this. I was going to come back to the Matt Nagy situation because I wanted to come back to the situation of, I'm thinking of the Eric Bieniemy, right?
Yep.
And guys that were both in the same exact situation. They were both offensive coordinator for Patrick Mahomes. One guy leaves and gets 2 head coaching opportunities from being next to Patrick Mahomes. The other guy, the black man, Eric Bieniemy, there are rumors that he's too tough on running backs. He doesn't call the plays. He's just Andy Reid, left hand man or right hand man. He's not responsible for the offense. But the guy who is in the same exact situation gets 2 head coaching opportunities from that position, or at least 1 head coaching opportunity, and then to be the offensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears. So yeah, this is the biggest fraternity on earth. And I'll say this: I'm gonna go ahead and unleash my final point right now. I've said it, I'm gonna say it again, right? NFL, save Hard Knocks. I don't give a damn about the training camps and who sings what songs in August and all this other stuff. Show me the head coaching interviews. That's what I want to see. If you really want to appease me, you really want to please me, you really want me to tap in as a fan, show me the head coaching interviews. Show me the guys that y'all decide to hire and why y'all decided to hire them compared to the other guys that are out there, right? The Rooney Rule, at the end of the day, it's become a situation that's become a mockery, right?
Yep.
At the end of the day, that all you have to do is bring in a minority coach and interview him when you already know you're not going to hire this guy. And lastly, I always say this: ability. At the end of the day, the owners are thinking about who they like the most. That's what this is about. This is not about who they believe can win the most football games. It's who they want to see and work every day. It's who they want to give $10 million to every single year. That's what this is about. So the reason it is a mockery is because fundamentally the NFL doesn't want to fix it. They don't want to fix it at all. Because if they wanted to fix it, they would be able to address this process. And unfortunately, minority coaches for the next 10, 20, 30 years, who knows? Because this thing has actually gone backwards in the past decade. They're going to constantly be in a situation where they potentially have to compromise their integrity, their personality, and what they stand for to hang in circles that they don't necessarily want to hang in, because of getting a head coaching job is about who you decide to drink a beer with.
And as I said, I alluded to this, but I'll say it as frankly as Bruce said it. If Chuck Pagano didn't get cancer, Bruce Arians never becomes a head coach. And that's because Bruce Arians refused to change who he was. He was brash, he was honest, he was upfront. And when you look at the resumes, you don't even have to look to a minority. You can look at 2 white men, and you can look at Mark Trestman's resume and Bruce Arians' resume, and you will laugh, because one is so ridiculously one-sided that the obvious choice in any shape or form, I could ask my grandmother to make this decision, and she's making this very easily, because one had cachet, Super Bowl champions, had coached literally Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, and Ben Roethlisberger, and the other one was coaching in the Canadian Football League. It's quite frankly an atrocity that ever happened, but that I bring up for a purpose, because Bruce told me that he walked out of that room and he felt confident that he got that job. And then after the fact, he never received a single piece of feedback from the Chicago Bears as to how to get better. When you want to talk about your process and you want to talk about how I can actually believe that you guys are trying to make it better, I want those tapes. I want to watch exactly what Keith said. But if you're not going to do that, then you at least need to provide these head coaches that are going up for these jobs with actual feedback on how they get these jobs. Because how exactly is Eric Bieniemy supposed to get any better when nobody tells him what he did wrong? How is that possible? In any job interview, in any industry, when you leave, the easy thing is to that person to give you feedback as to how you could do better next time. And the NFL does not do it. I don't understand why they don't change this process. It is very, very easy to change this. It is a very simple change. And the owners don't want to do it because nobody holds them accountable. So maybe Draft Club in March, when the NFL owners meetings are here in Phoenix, maybe Keith and I will start holding the owners accountable, because it sure as hell ain't going to be ESPN, who just gave 10% of their total business to the NFL. It's not going to be ESPN. It's not going to be Fox. It's not going to be CBS, who are all in bed with the NFL. The only people that are going to hold them accountable are the fans and the media that does not have TV rights. Because otherwise, you're getting a phone call from Jerry Jones. You know who can't call us and yell at us and can't take us off the air? Jerry Jones. We're not on his TV. He doesn't own us, and he never will. So I think that's how I'm going to leave things, because I desperately want those interviews. I want to watch how exactly they're doing it, because I've talked to enough coaches to know there isn't any process behind this. It's different every year, and they need to be held to the fire, because as of what we've known, look at the last interview that we were talking about. Terry Pegula showed himself. Put more owners in front of the mics and you're going to see why your team isn't very good. It's because your owner sucks. Jerry Jones is just the only one that's upfront and honest about it.